You're listening to 10 Points, a podcast with your hosts, Ash and Nicholas, where all the talk is Canadian Highlander, our favorite format from the best trading card game ever, Magic the Gathering.
Hey everyone, it's me, Nicholas.
And me, Ash. Today we're going to be discussing what we would do to take a commander deck and change it up to be played Canadian Highlander.
But first, we have to talk about our best card from, and today we're doing our best card from Visions. Ash, what's your best card from Visions?
So, there were a couple cards in Visions that I was pretty interested in as considering as my best card from. Before I tell you my three that I decided between, I want to give an honorable mention, which is Impulse. Because Impulse is one in a blue, look at the top four, take one. And it is just a card that is in almost every blue deck. It just really helps smooth out the inconsistency that you get from playing a 100-card singleton. Notable, the Visions printing does say to shuffle your library. You don't do that. That is not part of the Oracle text.
It is not. I'm going to be honest, as I was looking through this set, I was like, there's a part of it, I was like, is Ash just going to pick Impulse? Because you love that
I thought about it. I really do. The card's great. The art's amazing. It's fantastic. But I did consider it, but the other three cards that were more realistic considerations were Natural Order, Vampiric Tutor, and Goblin Recruiter for me. Two of those pointed, one of them a huge part of what makes the Goblin deck so good. But the one that I am going to go with now, though, I initially didn't really pick cards based on their point values. I think after you did that in a recent episode, I kind of thought that makes a lot of sense. And I think as of right now, Natural Order is my pick. I think that it is way too good at 3 points. We were actually just discussing this recently on the Discord. I just think the card's ridiculous. I recently borrowed a deck that utilizes it at 3 points, and I had a Primeval Titan to play on turn 2.
Yeah,
it's dumb.
Yeah, the fact that you can just, run out such an early primetime is really hard to beat. Like, if you get a turn 2 primetime, even if they kill it immediately, they also have to deal with whatever you got, whether that just be Strip Wasteland or
a Raging Ravine.
Yeah.
So what do you have as your best card?
So I was picking between the same three cards. And I thought about saying Goblin Recruiter because it is the most impactful in the deck that it's played in. But I also ended up going with Natural Order, just for the same reason. Like, if you're playing a green deck that's playing the Natural Order package and it's in your opening hand, you're like, if it resolves, the game's pretty much over. And those decks are playing a ton of mana dorks, so you're almost always going to have it turn 3 unless they, kill your first, 1 or 2 creatures. And then you just get a prime time. And then obviously it's really good in the Cradle Hoof decks or whatever, just, a very cheap way to get Hoof and kill them quick.
Yeah, I haven't done the math on how many times, not math really, I haven't done the research on how many games that a Natural Order has been resolved and that player not won, but I imagine it's pretty low. Now, I did think that we were going to pick different cards. I pegged you on Vampiric Tutor, but I'm kind of happy to hear that we both did consider Goblin Recruiter as a very legitimate option, and I'm confident that our editor is going to be happy to hear about that as well. Local Goblins expert, I would say.
Yes, for sure.
So let's kind of get into this episode, eh?
Yeah. We'll start out with you already introduced what we're talking about, correct?
Yeah. We're going to be talking about how we would convert Commander decks to Canadian Highlander decks.
Yeah. So, quick disclaimer. This is less of a how do I turn this Commander deck that I like into a super competitive Canlander deck. This is more of I'm trying to get into Canlander. I don't really know where to start. So instead of going out and building a very expensive deck that I don't even know if I enjoy, I'm going to take one of my Commander decks that I have lying around and switch a few cards, make a few points adjustments, and bring this to my local Canadian Highlander Friday night or whatever. and just like get to play some Canlander, get to jam some games, learn what you like, learn what you don't like, and then decide if you want to like really delve in and really put money into making a Canlander deck.
Now, I would like to add a disclaimer to the disclaimer, which is, though it's not as common, I have seen on 2 or 3 occasions straight up commander decks be altered somewhere between 15 and 30 cards and become really functional, like very playable Highlander decks. So sometimes it works out, but it's not all the time.
Yeah, and of course, depending on what, like how competitive your commander deck was, like if you're playing CEDH, chances are it's not going to be as difficult for you to turn your commander deck into a competitive Canlander deck. But for a normal casual commander deck, you can definitely turn it into a functional Canlander deck, but it will not be as tuned as it could be if you started from scratch.
Right. We didn't really talk about this, but do you kind of want to alternate taking point on these marks we want to touch on?
Yeah, that's fine.
You want to get started?
Sure. So the first and probably most important thing to consider before you get into anything else is what is the core of the deck? Mainly, does this deck work without the commander? Because obviously in Canadian Highlander, we do not have a commander in the command zone. So if your deck is built entirely around getting your commander down and then doing things, that's probably not the deck to be doing this with, because it's going to take a lot of work to convert that into something that could be played in Canlander.
Yeah, a little bit later, we're going to actually give some examples of some decks that we could and could not convert to Highlander. And the biggest difference is the main idea of how the deck works. One of them works in Highlander and one just straight up doesn't. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is later.
Yeah, and of course there's other factors dealing with the core of the deck. Like if you're playing, like let's say, like a group hug strategy, obviously that's probably not particularly ideal in Canlander either. So a lot of it will be like kind of common sense, but the biggest thing to consider is, does the deck work without the commander?
I would say the kinds of decks that are going to be most likely to function to some extent in Highlander without changing, the entire list are going to be tribal decks, because by default, most tribal decks are just variants on creature decks that turn sideways. So where a lot of other commander decks like Group Hug or Group Slug decks or like different types of, commander combo decks, they're pretty hard to move over to Highlander just because the way they work doesn't work with just the way the format is built. But when you're looking at most tribal decks, they're just full of creatures that play lords and turn sideways. And that is something that, while it might not be optimal, is definitely like you can put it in the Highlander format.
Yeah. That being said, tribal decks are not the only decks that can be converted. They're probably just going to be the easiest. But you can really turn any deck that like could be played in a 1v1 format can be turned into a Canlander deck.
Just about.
Depending on the list, yeah. Which we'll continue talking more about this as we continue going through the list.
Yeah. So the next key point to think about when you're looking to move stuff from Highlander to Commander, from Commander to Highlander, is all this stuff that cares specifically about your Commander, and up to and including the Commander itself, isn't going to work in Canadian Highlander when you don't have one. So that will include the Commander itself, any cards with a Lieutenant mechanic, which, if you don't know, does something if you currently control your Commander. All those spells that came out in the Ixalan Commander decks, well, I guess it was Commander 19, because that was like before they started doing set Commander decks. The ones that lined up with Ikoria, not Ixalan. Ikoria. When they had the cycle of free spells that are only free if you control your Commander, those aren't going to work in this format, so you're probably going to want to cut them. Backgrounds from the new Baldur's Gate, those don't work because you don't have any commanders. And Command Tower and Arcane Signet, stuff that care about your commander's color identity, also are not going to work at all.
As well as the 3 mana one that taps for your commander's colors and sacks to draw will also not work.
Oh, the Commander's Sphere, yeah. Which, that card's also just bad.
Yeah.
Hot takes with Ash.
That being said, if it's in your commander deck, that's not a problem. But if it's in your commander deck that you're turning into a Canlander deck, that is a problem. So we'd recommend going through with a fine-tooth comb and making sure that you don't miss any of those. On to the next point. This is arguably the most important, because...
Point?
Yeah. I did a little pun there. Because if you mess this up, your deck will not be legal. So points check yourself. Obviously, in Commander, there is no points limit, so oftentimes Commander decks will be way over the allotted 10 points that you are allowed to have in Canlander. So we will link the Canadian Highlander points list in the description. And then, just make sure, you go through your deck. Obviously, every Commander deck is going to have a Soul Ring, and then a lot of decks will be playing miscellaneous tutors, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault.
Probably not True Name Nemesis.
Probably not, but, it could be in there depending on what you're doing.
A lot of decks play Natural Order, and you'll see not Green Sensei. What was I just about to say? Pod, maybe? Nicholas said, there's a lot of tutors that go in Commander decks.
Yeah, the biggest thing that you'll be looking for is tutors and fast mana. That being said, very important, look at the points list, figure out where you are over points, and make appropriate adjustments, because if you show up with an 11-point deck, that's just very awkward.
If it's okay with you, I'm going to slightly change the order of our bullets here.
Yeah, that's fine.
A good thing to replace those pointed cards with is probably cards that are banned in Commander but good in Highlander. Probably the biggest example is no, my brain just completely shut off. No idea what that's it. That's the one.
The one that Natural Order gets.
Yes. If you're playing a green deck that is looking to either go big or just is a mid-range deck, there's a good chance you're playing Primeval Titan. At least in our local meta in the Cincinnati area, almost every green mid-range deck is playing Primeval Titan into Field of the Dead just because it's almost a free roll. It's just so good. Because you don't actually have to keep Primeval Titan in play, you just gotta cast it once and then it starts winning the game.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not super familiar with the Commander ban list.
So the entirety of Power is banned.
Isn't
Oh, sorry, Twister's not banned.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, so all the good Power is banned. That's not true. Twister is great in specific decks, but not in the same decks. It's good in Commander. But if it's something you have access to, or maybe if the community you're playing in utilizes proxies, you might be using Power. A lot of decks that, like those tribal decks I talked about, a lot of the times you can just play Moxes and they're really good in those types of decks. But of course, you'll also be looking to play Recall on a lot of decks. If anyone's been watching any of our gameplay, I've played Recall on almost all of my decks.
Wow. Wait, have you? Yeah, all of them but one.
I played it in Esper, Blue-White, Jeskai, and... I've played Blue and White in everything.
Yeah, you didn't play it in Thassa's Oracle, though. At least I hope you weren't playing it in Thassa's Oracle, because...
No, I didn't. But I just realized I've played Blue and White in every single one of our Paperlanders up to this point.
So in case you were wondering what kind of decks Ash enjoys, he enjoys stripping his opponent of fun and killing everything.
Okay. People, we'll put a poll. We'll put a poll on this episode that I hope people vote on to decide what I play at the next Paperlander. Unless this doesn't come out until after we record the next one, in which case it'll be the next one. But do I play a deck that is not blue, or do I play a like affinity type deck where it's blue but it's aggro? Comment.
All right. Yep. Tell Ash what to play. All right. Next point. We got a little bit off track there. But going on to the next point, check the average CMC of your deck. For the most part, most Commander decks, the average CMC is going to be a decent bit higher than the average Canlander deck. And while you're probably not going to be able to completely fix that, maybe cut some of the more high-cost CMC cards.
The big splashy battle cruiser stuff.
Yeah, that are more geared towards killing multiple opponents. As to where in Canlander you're only trying to kill one. And obviously there are exceptions, like if your deck is built around, if you're playing a ramp deck or something, then obviously your CMC is going to be pretty high.
And even in Blue-White Control, you play 4 6-drops, but your average is really low because you play a crap ton of 1-drops, but also your game plan is geared toward making the game go long so you get to that mana point. Where a lot of Highlander games are just going to go a lot shorter than the average Commander game. So you're not just going to naturally get there.
Yeah, so basically when you're looking through your deck and looking at what changes to make, if you're looking for cards to cut, the one of the better places to start would be take out some of your higher costed. Is that a word? Higher costed? Higher cost threats. And maybe...
I think higher costed is, well, it's 2 words, but I'm pretty sure costed is a word.
I'm sure someone will correct me if I was wrong. And if
They'll
I was
correct
right,
us if we were right.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on. The next thing we want to talk about is interaction. More specifically, efficient interaction. In Commander, you'll see Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares here and there, but the kinds of things you don't see very much in Commander that you will need to see in Highlander and you want to be playing in your decks is the really cheap, efficient interaction for the early game, such as Thoughtseize, Mana Leak, Lightning Bolt, stuff like that, that is going to help you interact with your opponent early so you can actually make it to your mid or late game. Or you might be playing the fast aggressive stuff, so you need to be expecting to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into our next point too, which is you'll want more 1-for-1s as well. So while a lot of Commander decks are playing a pretty high number of Wraths and stuff like that, because obviously you're trying to deal with 3 or 2 to 5 opponents. I don't know who's playing a 6-player Commander game, but
I would say even more than just Wraths. You'll see straight up board wipes, removing all types of permanents, where you don't see that almost at all in Highlander.
Yeah, so you'll want to take a lot of that style of cards out and replace them more with 1-for-1s. Like Ash said, Lightning Bolt, Mana Leak, Thoughtseize.
A Braid is a great one.
Yeah, a Braid is really good. Even
Decay, Assassin's Trophy.
In red decks, oftentimes you'll be on even some of the maybe 2 mana bolts, depending on where you're going. Flame Slash is one that you don't see in many other formats, but is very good in Canlander.
You actually, I've been seeing Shattering Spree show up in red decks, just because there's just enough artifacts for it to be good. In
Canlander?
Yeah.
I have not noticed that, but that's interesting.
Well, there's not very many RDW decks we see around. We mostly just see medium red, which wouldn't be on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, efficient interaction, efficient removal. No, we're not playing utter ends in here.
Yeah. And
honestly, Vindicated honestly feels bad sometimes.
Yeah. And with that being said, we're not saying cut all of your Wraths. If you're playing a control deck, Wrath of God is very good. Don't take it out of your deck. But if you're playing
control, oh sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you're playing some sort of creature-based deck or something, and you're playing a Wrath of God just in case your opponents have more creatures than you, you probably don't want to be playing that in Canlander, because if you're in the position where you have so few creatures and your opponent has so many creatures that you have to cast the Wrath of God, something went wrong.
Yeah. In Blue-Eye Control, I think, granted, our metagame is pretty creaturey. I feel like we talk about that a lot. But, I think at my peak, I was on 9 Wrath effects. I think right now I'm on 7. But, in control decks, you play lots of Wraths. But even then, you're not... Like, you're not looking to play the, like, Dune Blast, the 7 mana ones. Like, you're looking to play, like, the 4 mana ones, maybe a 3 mana one if you're in black, and, like, Farewell because it's busted.
Yeah. Which, I mean, and even 7 Wraths is a lot for most decks. Blue White gets away with it because it is playing, well, at least Ash's list in particular is playing little to no creatures.
Well, no creatures you refuse to kill.
Yeah, and like he said, we have a pretty creature-heavy meta. But yeah, if your commander deck is built to be a more controlling deck, Wraths are acceptable.
Yeah. So one other thing that often comes up that I've seen a lot when people have tried to transfer commander decks to Highlander is they kind of get stuck on a couple cards and they just kind of think of them as absolute staples. But the reality is they're staples in Commander, but just aren't in Highlander. Some of the kind of the big poster childs of this are like Vidalcan Orrery or Doubling Season, Torment of Hailfire. You know, these cards are extremely good in Commander, but in reality, when you're playing them in Highlander, it's just usually they don't do enough. And also something you probably note about a lot of those in specific is they are all cards that cost a lot of mana.
Yeah,
which is kind of the reason they're less good in Highlander.
And even some of the lower cost cards, like
Soul Ring, even.
Well,
sometimes
yeah, I mean,
your deck doesn't want Soul Ring.
That's true. Depending on your points, you might not be playing Soul Ring. And things like Rhystic Study, which obviously, if you're a Commander player, you look at that card and you're like, oh, that just goes in every deck. That draws me so many cards. But in Canlander, it's not like drawing you enough cards to be worth paying the 3 mana. And things like Smothering Tithe, same thing. When you have 3 opponents, those cards get much better than when you have 1 opponent.
I would say, actually, I don't know how I forgot it, so thank you for bringing it up, but Rhystic Study is probably the number 1 card that people try to play in Highlander that like are coming from a Commander background. That's probably the number 1 that I've seen, that I've had to be like, no, you don't want this.
Yeah. Yeah, so... And those are cards that when you cut, you can replace them with efficient interaction 1-for-1s like we talked about earlier. The next kind of like big thing to like look at is you're no longer bound by color identity. So does your deck's game plan perhaps like do you want to add a color or even just like throw a Kitchen Finks into your deck that you couldn't play before? If you had like a Gruul commander deck, you can now play Kitchen Finks and Deathrite Shaman, things that you would not be able to play in your commander deck. So while it's not vital, yeah, Caracas.
That one was banned, I guess, but
yeah, like I guess, yeah, but really, those it's not vital that you like include those cards in your deck, but you now can. So if they fit with your deck's game plan, it's worth maybe trying to find a place to slot those in.
Like if you're like trying to transfer Black Green Marin to Highlander, you probably are playing Kitchen Finks now.
Yeah, Kitchen Finks is really good in that deck.
Yeah, it is. So another big thing that people don't always think about, people do sometimes, but oftentimes they don't. It just kind of passes them by, is thinking about their land base and how that changes when you switch over to Highlander. And there are 3 big things to think about when you're looking to transfer the land base. The first one is, are you playing too many tap lands? In Commander, you can often afford to play a lot more tap lands because the game usually goes slower. It's not as much of an issue to be playing so many tap lands. But in Highlander, oftentimes the way things play out, playing a tap land on the wrong turn can cost you the game. Chad talked a little bit about, back in episode 3, about how he manages to get away with a number of tap lands just based on the way that he plays the deck and the types of hands he keeps and how he plays them out. But for most decks, you don't want to be playing very many tap lands at all.
I was just going to say, another thing to consider too is maybe more utility lands. Commander oftentimes is a format more for like the fun of the table. So you're not always like putting a wasteland in your deck because I mean, nobody wants to be like targeted and have their land wastelanded when everyone else is not having their land wastelanded. But in Canlander, obviously that's no longer an issue. So look at like utility lands that you could add. Krakus, as Ash mentioned earlier, Wasteland. Depending on what your game plan is, you could play Strip Mine, but that is 3 points. So yeah, like more utility lands, man lands. I don't think see as much play in Commander, but in Canlander it's often worth it to play some number of them. Not a ton, because as Ash said, you got to be really careful with what tap lands you're playing. But oftentimes you can slot a few of those in your deck.
Yeah, most of the World Wake ones are really good. Most of the Battle for Zendikar ones are straight poo poo. But also a couple of the AFR ones are really good in Highlander as well. Mainly the red and blue one, but almost all of them come up in Highlander. Besides, well, even the white one does sometimes. But so mainlands are a good option. Other things that you want to think about with your land base is usually in Commander the average number of lands is going to be a couple higher, just based on the fact that, as we talked about before, the average CMC of Commander is usually a lot higher and the games go longer and you don't want to be missing land drops. But in Highlander, based on what your deck's trying to do, you're usually okay missing land drops after a certain point. Like, a lot of mid-range decks, if they aren't doing the Field of the Dead thing, are pretty fine to stop drawing lands after they hit their 4th or 5th land drop. A lot of aggro decks don't usually want to hit their 4th, or don't usually want to hit a 5th land drop. Sometimes don't even want to hit a 4th land drop, depending how their deck works. Like medium red, you rarely want to hit, like you don't want to be planning to hit 5 lands, like ever. And 4 is on certain hands, but often you really just want like 2, maybe 3 lands, and then an accelerant, you know? So you're going to be playing significantly fewer lands in Highlander. Even like the most land heavy decks in Highlander are like the same or a little lower than like the average Commander deck, I think.
Yeah, I think most Canadian Highlander decks top off at like 40, and even that's a very high number. I'd say like somewhere between 34, 35, and 40 is where you want to be, depending on your deck's game plan.
Well, if you're playing like Affinity or Ash's version of Red, you're on like 29 lands, but that's bad.
Yeah, and things obviously like Paradox Academy and stuff are playing fewer lands because you're on so many mana rocks.
But Eggs also plays a pretty low land count, like 33.
Generally, those are not decks that are Commander decks, unless maybe it's CEDH. Obviously, Paradox Academy would not be legal in Commander, but I guess Academy decks probably see some play. So yeah, just take that into consideration. Maybe if your deck resembles a pre-existing Canlander deck, it might be worth it to look up a list and just kind of see how many lands that deck is playing, because obviously it's hard for us to give you an exact guideline without seeing a list. But if you can find a deck that's somewhat similar to yours, you can kind of figure out about how many lands you want to be on. It's not going to be a huge difference between what you're on now and what you want to be on, but it could matter for sure.
Yeah. And then I think we might have already touched on this earlier, but just to go over it again, the last big thing you want to deal with your land base is cut Command Tower, and probably cut all the Battle Bond and Baldur's Gate lands that are that care about the number of opponents you have, because those don't work.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to take a look at? We've got 2 lists here. One of which does not work or could not reasonably be converted to a Canlander deck, and the other one that could. And we're just going to kind of briefly go through these and explain why each one is where it is.
What do you think about taking each list and going through the list of points we just went through with each one and talk about what would and wouldn't work, and then look at it holistically that way?
Yeah, that's fine. That sounds good to me.
Okay, so in that case, this is the wrong tab. Okay, here's the deck. Okay. So, starting off, we're going to link both of these deck lists in the description.
Which I don't believe neither of these are our deck lists. I don't think these are just lists that we found online.
Yeah.
So
yes, we'll link them both. So this first one is a commander deck. It is a Mardu Kalia the Vast deck. So this card, the commander of this deck, is 1 in Mardu for a 2/2 legendary creature, human cleric. It has flying, and whenever it attacks an opponent, you can put an angel, demon, or dragon creature from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking that opponent. So just right there, you're probably getting kind of an idea of how you would build this deck in Commander. You know, you're filling it with these really good angels, demons, and dragons, so you can cheat it into play and just generate insane value that way. Now, the problem when you go to try and move a deck like that into Highlander is you can't consistently have the commander, so what does your deck do without the commander? You're really just a deck full of, like a Mardu deck full of super expensive angels, demons, and dragons that are hard to cast.
Yeah, and obviously that's not something that would work super well. That could be made to work, but it would take a lot of work, and it would probably take more work than just building a fresh deck. So already this has failed the biggest question, but we can keep going through it and checking out the rest of the list as well.
Next bit we got here is does the commander matters. I mean, really, there's an arcane signet and a command tower, and I think that's all that's in here.
Yeah. So obviously,
unless there's some random dragon,
if you wanted to convert your Kalia deck anyway, those would be cards you'd cut. The next big thing is points. I did a quick check, and this is way over points. I see a Soul Ring, I see a Mana Crypt, I see a Demonic Tutor, I see a Vampiric Tutor. So already that's like, 14 points? And I might have missed some cards. That was just after a quick...
there's a Jewel Lotus, which you would cut for commander mattering.
Oh, yeah, cut Jewel Lotus.
This is the 8... Yeah, I think that's 14. I think that sounds right.
So, obviously, something would have to come out. I'd say probably in this list. I mean, if you decided to try to force it anyway, I would say you'd probably have to cut the Demonic Tutor because you need the fast mana to try to play your absurdly expensive threats. But like we said, already, after the very first question, this deck you'd probably want to rule it out, just due to the fact that it would be very, very difficult to make it work.
Yeah, the mana curve for this deck, it goes there's no 0 drops.
Well, there's
2 0 drops.
One of which is Jewel Lotus.
Yeah. So there really 1 0 drop that you could play. About 10 1 drops, about 14, 12, 2 drops, and then from then on you drop down to a few 3 drops, and then just insane numbers of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think we have an 11 drop in here. So it's just not happening. There's the only way that I see this deck even kind of working is if you cut some of the big creatures and then put in as many looting effects as you can possibly find and play more reanimation spells.
That's true. Which that is a good point to bring up, is if you really want to make a deck work in Canlander, but the way that it is trying to play now doesn't work, you can just try to find a deck that lines up similarly. If you just really like slamming big demons, angels, and dragons, but you don't really care how it happens, you could totally convert this deck into a Reanimator deck. And while it would maybe take a bit of work, you could make a reasonable Reanimator deck out of a decent portion of this list.
Yeah. I think it would just be kind of a worse version of most other reanimation builds, but like it's not impossible. Let's see what's next. Interaction. There's a couple of interactions. Like there's a path, there's a swords, there's a Vandal Blast, which is there's not as many artifacts in Canelander on average as there's in Commander decks. So like Vandal Blast is often dead, so I would cut it. I've seen it in Highlander, and I've been got by it in Highlander, but I think on average it's pretty bad, and I would not suggest playing it. Boros Charm is pretty mid in, like, let's say we lean into the reanimation idea, right? Boros Charm seems like not what we want to do. So like the interaction of making your like blanking the removal is we have some Toxic Deluge, so like there is some some interaction in this list. But like, you know, these wraths aren't good. You probably don't want to be wrathing. Ravages of War is like maybe fine, probably mid. I've said mid so many times. Holy crap. Yeah. But like, there's also a Chroma's Will that cares about if you have your commander in play.
Yeah, and this is a good example of a deck that is creature based, but it's also playing a lot of wraths. At least the list that we're looking at is on like 1, 2, 3, like 5 wraths, and that's too many for some control decks in Canelander. So you definitely don't want to be playing that in your creature based deck. I'd say maybe the only one that you'd want to be playing in this deck is Toxic Deluge, because you can choose the value, and since a lot of your creatures are bigger than your opponents, you can generally turn it into a one-sided wrath.
Yeah. So I would probably be looking to put in some more efficient removal like Bolt, Flame Slash, Thought Seize effect, like some hand attack would be good, probably Duress.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd be looking to do.
Like Fatal Push, things like that.
Yeah, and that kind of fills out that 1-for-1 slot as well.
Yeah. Now for commander staples that aren't good in Canelander, I see a Smothering Tithe, which is not great.
Now, this is notable. Armageddon and Ravages of War see play in a lot of commander decks like this, where you're trying to slam big stuff into play and then stop your opponents from interacting. But those cards are good in Highlander, but only in the right deck. Those don't just go in every white Highlander deck at all. So, I would kind of consider those part of this category.
Yeah, you definitely have to be really careful with how you're playing those, because oftentimes you'll have them in your hand and they'll just be very awkward.
Yeah, a couple other ones are like Vilis and Razaketh. They're big, expensive demons, which is why you don't see them, but also they each have an activated ability that requires you to pay 2 life. And by the time you're probably getting this stuff in play, and the fact that a lot of your reanimation is going to cost your life total, I should say some, maybe not a lot of it, but you might not have that expendable life total. So though, while they're great in Commander where your life total is basically infinite, you don't really have that freedom in Highlander.
Yeah. Same thing with Phyrexian Reclamation. Paying 2 life just to return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. That gets real expensive in Canelander, as to where Commander, it's not that big of a problem. Other things like Teferi's Protection, you're just not playing that in Canelander.
Yeah, unless you're playing Turbo Fog, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
which don't.
If you're playing Turbo Fog, you're already playing a really fringe, not super competitive Canelander deck. So I don't know if we want to be.
You know what? If you're playing Turbo Fog, you do you.
Yeah, we're proud of you.
Yeah, don't play Sower of Discord. That's where you choose 2 people. And when you hit one, you hit the other, so don't do that. Also, like, all this artifact ramp, I don't know that this is the deck for it, really. Like, maybe, but then I feel like you're splitting yourself up too much.
Yeah, which a lot of the problem here lies in the fact that, like we had said previously, this deck just wouldn't be good regardless. So if you're going for the reanimation style version of this list to make it playable, then you definitely don't want all this artifact ramp. And if you are just trying to cast these things fairly, then you probably need a decent amount more ramp.
Well, you're playing 4 color, no blue. Like, you're splashing green.
Yeah,
at
and
that point.
your game plan, you're now just a ramp deck that's ramping into Angels, Demons, and Dragons.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I see any more that I'm like, yeah, that's just a commander card.
Yeah, everything else...
Maybe Necropotence doesn't really see, like, because if you're going to be playing, again, I know we're talking about how we play this as Reanimator, but that kind of seems like the only way to go with it. So, like, Necropotence is bad because it exiles your discards. Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves are probably, like, you're probably not doing those. Like, great, you get to haste up your reanimated target, but, like, if they stop you from reanimating the thing anyway, like, you know, you just want to be more consistent at doing that.
Yeah. And then, like, banned cards that you could be playing, Krakus would be really good in this deck, as it is in most decks. Besides that, I don't know if I see...
Maybe Moxes, because, like, those are helping you just, like, jump into the reanimating part.
Yeah.
But you gotta jack up your whole point spread anyway, and I'm not sure what the point spread really wants to look like in this deck, so kind of hard to say.
Yeah. But do we want to move on from this? I mean, the whole kind of point of showing this deck was showing a deck that it really wouldn't be worth trying to convert it because it would be too difficult. So the next deck is one that could actually reasonably be transferred over, and we'll kind of go through the checklist again. And
this one's going to be more fun.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be editing in real time a copy of this, which we will also link in the description. So we will link the EDH version and the Canadian Highlander version of this next list.
Oh, are we like actually converting this?
Oh yeah, we're doing it.
Sure. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the first thing that we're checking, the core of the deck. So this is a Kess Dissident Mage deck, which is kind of just like a Spells Matters type of...
Do you want to read Kess?
Yeah. Kess is 1 in Grixis, so 4 mana, for a legendary creature human wizard with flying. And then during each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard. And then if a spell was would cast this way, would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. And it's a 3/4. So obviously, Kess doesn't matter as much in the context of this being a Canlander deck because you will not have access to it all the time. But it being a Spells Matters kind of deck like that, it's something that with a little bit of effort could be turned into a Canlander deck that you could bring to your local Friday night Canlander and just like play around with it and get a feel for Canlander.
I'd say for sure you could actually play Kess herself in this deck.
Oh yeah, I really like Kess in these kind of decks, and I think this is kind of gonna be more of like a really spell heavy, maybe Grixis, somewhere between a Grixis midrange and a control deck.
Yeah, which we've talked a lot about how that line kind of blends really frequently.
Yes, and Kess slots into that kind of deck really well.
Okay, so we've established that the core of the deck does in fact work in Highlander. So that's step 1 out of the way. We are on track to play the game. So the next thing we're going to need to look at is, are there any cards that care specifically about Kess being your commander? And anything like that we have to get rid of. So,
I don't actually see a command tower.
Really? That's interesting. Hey,
or an arcane signet. There's neither one of those, so we're already on the right path.
So something that stands out to me is this Mox Amber. While it doesn't specifically rely on having your commander, it kind of does, because this list, as written, only has 1 creature, which is Kess in the command zone. And even the other creatures that we could reasonably add to this deck are probably not going to be legendary creatures. And even if they are, by the time we have them in play, we probably don't want to be playing a Mox. So I would say this Mox Amber is very easily booted out of here.
Yeah. Additionally, there is a Commander Sphere, which, interestingly enough, is the one that you said that no one plays.
No, I didn't say no one does. I said no one should.
Sure.
Wait, I'm confused why they're playing Command Sphere and not Arcane Signet. How old is this list? I don't know how old the list is.
Deck date August 12th, 2022.
No, August 12th.
That's what it says. Either way, we're not here to bash this dude's commander deck. We're here to turn this dude's commander deck into a Canlander deck.
I'm actually going to copy it over to Moxfield, only the Moxfield version, because I don't want to be putting people's names on the internet without permission.
Yeah, that's very fair. Alright, so I think we've addressed the Commanders Matters cards. If we come across another one later, we can...
Jessica's Will.
I don't even know what that one does.
It does. It's a modal card, but if you have your commander, it does both modes.
Yeah, that would be one that you'd want to cut. Now for points. I see a Mana Vault, which is 1.
Mystical Tutor.
I don't even see a Soul Ring.
Demonic Tutor.
So far we're at 7.
Imperial Seal. Imperial Seal's 8. What brings us up to 8, rather. Mana Drain is 9.
I think that's it.
Okay. There probably would normally be a Soul Ring. I don't know why there isn't. There's not that many, there's a lot of colored pips in this deck, so maybe that's why, but...
Yeah, this
whatever.
Is a pretty color-intensive deck. Alright, so we are within the allotted points, which is also a plus.
But I'm thinking, honestly, this deck looks like the kind of deck that wants to be playing Treasure Cruise and Day Through Time.
Yeah, which we're only at 9. I think we probably...
cut the seal?
Yeah, cut the seal and add Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time.
Okay, let's do that. I agree with that. I'm also pretty iffy on a couple... Well, let's see. We'll get there when we get there. We'll do the points right now. Our next thing is going to be average CMC. So, is there any big CMC cards you see that you're like, I'm not sure that I would want that?
I would cut Diabolic Tutor. It's
I agree.
Too much mana.
And we're also not playing a deck that's has some insane tutor target.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. This isn't a deck that you are trying to get this one card to win the game.
Yeah. Same for the Dark Petition, honestly.
Yeah. I'm just going through all the cards real quick.
I could see leaving Brawl's Expertise, but I'm also happy to cut it. Spell Twine I don't like.
I think Brawl's Expertise is fine.
By the way, I don't know if I said this. We're gonna try and do this entire this entire conversion with changing no more than 25 cards.
Yeah, which even that we might try not even to get that high. I'd cut Gilded Lotus as well.
Hold on, I haven't been keeping track of how many cards we cut. Hold on. So I've added 2 cards and cut 6 cards. So because this Lotus, that's 7 cards.
Sunbird's Invocation is probably too much mana.
Agree, that's 8 cards. Spell Twine is 9 cards. Are you cool with the Spell Twine?
Yeah. In a format like this, you have less options with Spell Twine, whereas in Commander you have 3 opponents. Here you only have 1.
And there's also bigger, crazier things to get in Commander.
Yeah. Alright.
Will's Reversal is weird, but kind of interesting. I'm kind of down for it.
Yeah, that's one of those cards. I mean, and like we said, there's a lot of cards that are going to be included that we're not saying, oh yeah, this is great in Canlander, play it. But if a card is not, actively bad, you can just leave it in, and then as you get a better feel for Canlander, you can tune it better or build a brand new deck. We're just trying to make this so that you can bring it and maybe win a few games, maybe a couple matches.
Yeah, so I'm pretty down on all these mana rocks.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of them either.
like, I'd be down to leave the Sensei's Divining Top, which isn't even a rock, and, like, literally cut the rest of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is going to probably turn into more of a control type deck, so you really don't want to be playing mana rocks, because that just gives your opponent too much time to start resolving threats.
Yeah, which means we also need to cut the dramatic reversal combo.
Oh, I didn't even pay attention to that. Yeah, definitely.
Usually you don't have enough time to find all the artifacts to set that up in Highlander.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, leaving Isocon Scepter, like, might be fine.
I mean, like, what do you put under it? A bolt?
I mean, a bolt, a cantrip, a mystical tutor.
I don't know. There's also no brainstorm in this deck for some reason.
I mean, we'll get to that later.
I'm just confused because there's, like, consider and ponder and preordain.
Alright, Ash is continuing to poo-poo on this dude's brew.
Unnamed Kess list.
Yeah.
One day, some guy is gonna listen to this episode and be like,
he's gonna be like, that's
well, that
my list.
A lot like my list.
I will say, I'm not gonna say what it is, but this dude's profile name is, like, pretty dope. Or it's very funny.
Hold on, I'm not even looking at it on Goldfish. I'm writing up the
sure.
Moxfield version. Let me see the guy's name. Oh, I don't even have it. Okay, whatever. It's fine. I don't even know. Okay. So moving on to the
adding interaction. I would add a Flame Slash.
Yeah, that one's good.
I am not seeing Counterspell in this list. I would include that.
You think about Mana Leak?
Yeah, I'd add a Mana Leak. Mana Leak's already in here. Negate's already in here.
Forces?
I don't want to make the adjustments to the deck more expensive than... Like, I mean, presumably if you're trying to convert your commander deck to a Canlander deck, it's because you don't want to drop a bunch of money on a Canlander deck. So I don't want to assume that people have a Forcible in their back pocket.
I guess that's fair, but I mean, we're also looking at a list with a Damnation... Wait, right?
Which is 16.
Yeah, Damnation, Demonic Tutor. There was just an Imperial Seal in this list before we cut it, Sensei's Top.
Sure.
Which I know a lot of that has just gone down, to be fair. Actually, all of the cards they just listed besides Demonic Tutor were in Double Masters.
Wow.
So maybe that's a bad example. But I'm just saying, this deck doesn't look like it's super budget.
Sure. I mean, this is the...
I'm fine leaving it
This
out.
is the kind of thing where, I mean, when you convert your own deck, you'll have to determine, obviously, what cards you have access to and what cards you are wanting to buy and stuff.
Right. Okay.
Oh, do we want to cut Profane Tutor as well? That's...
I don't know if it's, like, it's not amazing, but it's, like, much less of a commitment than Diabolic Tutor. Like, I'm fine leaving it for now.
That's fair.
I don't like an offer you can't refuse in this type of deck. Like, if we were playing a combo deck, then maybe. But, like, this just seems like Highlander suicide.
Yeah. You don't need the 1 mana counter when it is accelerating your opponent that much, unless it's because you're trying to protect your combo or something.
I think pretty much we get to cut like 5 or 6 lands, and we're like right around that 25 card number. I stopped counting, but I'm pretty sure it's like right about there. So like I'm looking at cutting the bounce lands and the commander lands, and then that's it.
Cool. How many cards do we need to add?
Oh wait, I can just check that number. I can see exactly how many cards we are missing. Oh, no, we have so many more cuts. Oh wait, no, because I added more cards. Crap. How many cards do we add? Flame? Okay, hold on. We're not going to do this in the podcast. This is going to take way too long. We probably have about 6 more cards to cut.
How about this? We finish going through the checklist without, actually completely altering the list, and then after we finish recording, we'll go through and finish this and have it in the description.
Yeah, that's true. We are already pretty far through this. Okay, good call.
So we'll
talk about it though,
real quick.
So we already talked about 1-for-1 stuff. We already removed most of the stuff that wasn't 1-for-1. The animation's probably fine in a deck like this because there's 3 creatures you'll probably play.
Yeah. Damnation's totally fine. Honestly, you might even be on more wraths, maybe like a Pyroclasm and an Anger of the Gods or something.
I would also be down with a Toxic Deluge.
Yeah, for sure. Going on to color identity stuff.
Well, did we skip the Commander Staples thing? I mean, we already removed most of those in the big mana section, but Biforce we have here, which is destroy X target artifacts for X and a red as a sorcery. You're going to have so few targets in Highlander, that's a bad one.
Yeah, that's something you'd want to replace with, maybe an Abrade or something along those lines.
Abrade's a good option for that.
Magma Quake is another, card you'd probably want to cut for maybe a Deluge or something. You're also not on...
It's, fine, though. It's, fine enough to leave.
Yeah, you're also not on Grape Shot.
Yeah, I think that was just from this.
Yeah, that was yeah.
Chaos Warp is not great, but it's okay.
It's fun.
It is fun. That's true. No one can tell you it's not. I would probably cut the As Foretold and Precondition field if we had more cuts to make, but based on our arbitrary restriction, we're not doing it.
Polymorphous Jest is not great.
Yeah, it's not great removal, but it's fine. It's there.
So these would just be cards that you'd have to look at and kind of determine if they're worth it or not.
Yeah. Okay. So color identity. Is there anything that you'd want to be playing that we can't in Commander?
I don't think so.
What about banned cards?
Any banned? I mean,
probably Krakus.
Yeah, you're probably fitting a Krakus in here. Apart from that, I mean, depending on your budget and the cards you have access to, you could completely change up the point spread that is here currently and add a recall. I think that'd probably be
pretty good.
One of the better points for the deck. But obviously, not everyone is going to have an ancestral recall in their under their bed or whatever. So
yeah, I keep mine in my bathroom cabinet, the mirror. The medicine cabinet. I
usually like to hide mine in my washing machine and then just pull it out every time I'm about to do a load because no one ever looks there for valuable stuff.
That's true. I did find a copy of Mox Jet in Nicholas's washing machine one time though.
Yeah, sometimes I'm a little forgetful, but you know what they say. It only happens 3 or 4 times, and then you remember. So I will not do it the 5th time.
Good. I already touched on the lands, but cut the commander lands, meaning the ones that count opponents, like Morphic Pool and Morphic Pool. Other ones too.
Yeah, I'd also cut the Is It Boilerworks and
the bounce lands are not great.
The bounce lands.
Just about everything else here is fine besides the Adventure Sphere.
Yeah,
just because we cut all our artifacts.
Yeah.
And then as far as ban cards go, we just talked about that. So this deck has way more potential to be viable. It probably won't be top tier or anything, but it's definitely way more viable on Highlander. I would probably, assuming your budget allows it, put fetches in this deck. There are a lot of basics and no fetches for presumably either something to do with this person's playgroup or their own stance on fetch lands.
Or just their budget.
I mean, a lot of Commander players refuse to spend money on lands for some reason. Well, I don't want to say a lot. I have met Commander players before. This is coming from someone who, as of recording, works at a local game store. I've seen many Commander players willing to spend 3 times as much as some fetches on singles, but will not buy good lands for their decks. I kind of get it, but I also kind of don't get it. Okay, we're going on a tangent. It's just true. Okay, so anyway, do you have any last thoughts on the deck here?
I don't think so. Do we want to move on to what we played?
Yeah. So, do you want to go first or me?
I don't care either way.
Okay, I'll go first. So since we recorded last, I have played 2 decks. Actually, I've played 3 decks. It's been a little while since we recorded. I played Red Deck Recall, which is Red Deck wins, splashing blue for... I think my build was splashing blue for Ancestral Recall, Treasure Cruise, Back to Basics, and Expressive Iteration. Round 1, it went pretty good. I was up against Matt playing my midrange, and like I did okay, but then he just kind of natural ordered me, and as we kind of talked about, natural order, it's kind of hard to lose after you resolve a natural order.
Yeah.
So that was what it was. And I don't remember how the other game. I think I lost in 2, but like it was just like meh. Round 2, I won pretty swiftly. I was playing against, I believe, Seth on the Rock. And I don't think I drew any blue cards. I just kind of killed him. And then, sometimes red deck just red decks people. And then, I did Blood Moon him, though. Blood Moon definitely has something to do with it. And then round 3, I'm against Chad. And I resolve a Back to Basics. And then he just draws a bunch of basic lands, and I draw a bunch of non-basic lands, and then I lose.
It do be like that.
Yeah, but that was the boring day. Then next week I played Blue-White Control, and very excitingly, Blue-White controlled people because I haven't played in a long time on that deck, and it was just fantastic, and I love it so much. And every time I play it, I don't know why I play anything else. But those were further back. What I played last week was I didn't expect to play Highlander this day, but my other plans ended up falling through, so I ended up playing Highlander this day, but I didn't have my stuff, so what was I going to do? Well, I asked Matt if I could borrow his deck, because he wasn't playing, and he said, yes, you can play my Naya midrange deck. So I played that deck. In round 1, I'm up against Seth. He's playing The Rock, as per usual. And he manages to, he gets through all my early stuff, and I'm just I draw a lot of lands. At one point, I think I drew either 6 or 7 lands in a row. After having no more gas. And it was not great. But, he ended up slowing down just enough, and I had got him low enough before then. Like, he had a full board. He had 3 Planeswalkers, a crap ton of tokens, a Courser of Krufix. It was not looking good. But I drew Questing Beast. Well, actually, I drew a tutor for Questing Beast, and he had nothing with 3 power. So I was able to smash through with the Questing Beast for lethal, and it was beautiful. And then the next game, I lost. And in the third game, I had look at this amazing hand where I was going to go turn 1 Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor, turn 2 Ancient Tomb Bloodbraid Elf. It's going to be awesome. And then I just drew Natural Order on turn 2 and played Natural Order on turn 2 and got a Primeval Titan. And then I said, Natural Order needs to be pointed higher.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. And then the other matches, I lost the next one against Blue-White Control in a really, really close 3 games. And then the next match I went up against Paradox and playing a deck with freaking 12 creature tutors and Collector Roof. So that went exactly how you think it went. I won very fast.
I just love love the thought of natural ordering for a Collector Roof.
Okay, maybe we won't count that one. I mean, actually...
in that
matchup, you probably do.
That is completely reasonable. But it's... sometimes it's what you're doing. Spending 4 mana and a creature to get a 2 mana 2/2.
You know what? Sometimes bears be good. Okay, so I know I just talked about what I played the last 3 weeks, but would you like to talk about what you played anytime recently?
Yeah, I've played twice since we last recorded. One of them was very exciting, the other one wasn't, but I'll briefly talk about both of them. The first week, I was on Jund Midrange, a deck that I have obviously expressed a great love for, and I went 3-0. In my first match, I was against Flash Hulk. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I know one game was very one-sided for me, the other game was very one-sided for him, and then the last game, I killed him the turn before he was going to go off. So it was very close, but I eventually got there. I don't remember exactly what I was against in the second match. I think it was lands, but I can't remember for sure. But I just kind of junded him out. I think I got that one 2-0. Maybe it was 2-1. But the last match was the most exciting. I was in the mirror match against another Jund Midrange deck. Which is really funny because Jund Midrange is not a deck that you see that often, but we just both decided to build it and bring it that day. So it was, I think we were 1-1, and we were in the final game. And this is going to sing the praises of Krakus yet a little bit more. Which my opponent was pretty tired, and may have made a misplay or two. But I had a Krakus, and he cast Demonic Tutor. And he went to go get the vampire that pings things and then turns things that it pinged into vampires and then takes control of them.
Olivia Voldaren?
Yeah, he got an Olivia Voldaren. Played it, I Krakus'd it, he looks sad, he's like, that's what I Demonic Tutored for. The game goes on for a very long time after that. It was a very grindy game. He had Eternal Witness plus Unearth, so he could unearth the Eternal Witness and then get it back as a chump blocker. So he did that 4 or 5 times, and then finally he's like, alright, I'm going to get Demonic Tutor back this time. So he quits his loop, gets back Demonic Tutor, casts Demonic Tutor, starts delving away cards, and triumphantly slams the Tassiger, and I just tap my Krakus. He looks disappointed, and he's like, I need to get some sleep because he Demonic Tutored for the Tassiger. So he Demonic Tutored twice, both of which were for legendary creatures that were completely shut down by my Krakus, which was unfortunate for him.
That is a sizable oof.
Yeah, quite tragic. And then last week, I played 4-color Recurring Walks again. Round 1, I was against Grant on Mono Black Devotion. Game 1, we got to the point where I had 4 or 5 X2s, and he had 3 X3s, and he cast Toxic Deluge for 2, killing 4 or 5 of my creatures and leaving all of his alive, and then I died. And then game 2, he went turn 1 Dark Ritual into, why am I blanking? Into Necropotence. He played a turn 1 Necropotence. Filled up his hand, continued to have a full hand for the rest of the game. And unfortunately, 4-color Recurring Walks does have a strong mid-range plan, but it's not a particularly fast mid-range plan. So I'm not, pressuring his life total enough that he can't just always have a full hand with Necropotence. So I lost that one as well. And then game 2, I got the bye. And then match 3... What was I? Oh, I was against you match 3. I was against Ash on Blue-White Control. Game 1.
Oh, yeah, I resolved stuff.
You played a Humility game 1, and I was very sad. And then game 2, I just got, mana screwed. It was kind of brutal. But, that's how it goes. So I technically went 1-2, but one of the wins was a bye, so it doesn't really count. But yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Nothing I can think of off the top of my head. I think you and I are going to now, post-recording, trim up this list and slap it in the description.
Yeah, so if you want to look at the list that we were talking about, check the description, and the points list will also be down there.
Yeah, I would really quickly like to reiterate the disclaimer that these are not, this is not a super tuned Highlander list. It's just something that you could, without too much of a hassle, shift your deck over to make it much more Highlander playable to kind of begin your journey, as it were.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're going to build a Canlander deck, don't take this list that we post and be like, oh, I'm going to build that deck, because this is converting a commander deck to a Canlander deck. If you want to build like an Grixis spells deck, there are way better lists than what we will have produced.
If you want to do that, go into our Discord and go to the deck help channel and ask someone to help you with Grixis spells. We would be more than happy to make you help you with a good list.
Yeah.
All right. So if that's all, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the 10 Points Podcast. And don't forget to count your